In February 2021, Texas faced an unprecedented winter storm that brought the state's power grid to its knees. Known for its hot summers and mild winters, Texas was caught off guard by the extreme cold, leading to widespread power outages and a significant humanitarian crisis. The storm began on a seemingly ordinary Wednesday with isolated freezing rain that quickly spread across Texas. The first sign of trouble was a Delta Airlines flight that slid off the runway at Pittsburgh International Airport.
Tower, you have an aircraft off 3-1 on the North Vehicle Service Road. Please advise crash rescue. LaGuardia Airport is closed at this time.
Thankfully, no one was injured, but it was a warning of the chaos to come. Later that day, Fort Worth witnessed a massive car pileup involving 133 vehicles, many of which were driven by healthcare workers on their way to or from work. The accident resulted in multiple fatalities and injuries, overwhelming local emergency services. The severity of the cold and the suddenness of the storm created a chaotic and dangerous situation on the roads, highlighting the unpreparedness of the state for such extreme weather. Imagine the scene: drivers caught in blinding snow, trying to navigate icy roads, and suddenly finding themselves in a pile of wrecked cars. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but the sheer number of vehicles and injured people made their job incredibly challenging. It was a stark reminder of how quickly a routine day could turn into a disaster when nature strikes. As temperatures continued to drop, 22 gas power plants in Texas were forced to shut down. This exposed a significant flaw in the state's energy management system, which was not designed to handle such extreme cold. The demand for electricity surged as people tried to stay warm, leading to rolling blackouts that affected over 3.6 million residents.
This morning when I called, they told me 10 a.m., but I called back after 10 a.m., and they said that they were just working on it, so there was no update.
The infrastructure, including gas production facilities and pipelines, struggled to operate in the freezing conditions. This led to a dramatic increase in energy prices and disruptions in various industries. Many businesses were forced to close, and critical services were disrupted. The failure of the power grid turned a weather emergency into a full-blown crisis, with far-reaching economic and social consequences. Think about it: families huddled together in their homes, bundled up in blankets, trying to stay warm without power. Many were left without heat, light, or a way to cook food. The sudden loss of power also meant that hospitals and other critical facilities had to scramble to maintain operations, using backup generators that weren't designed to run for extended periods. The Texas Power Grid, managed by the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, operates largely independently from the rest of the country. This autonomy limited Texas's ability to import power from other states during the crisis. The decision to keep the grid independent was partly to avoid federal regulation, but it left Texas vulnerable when its internal systems failed. This independence, once a point of pride, became a significant liability during the storm. The storm's impact was devastating for many families. Several people died from carbon monoxide poisoning as they used cars and generators indoors to keep warm. One heartbreaking case was that of 11-year-old Christian Pavon, who died from hypothermia. He had been excited to see snow for the first time, but his family's mobile home couldn't protect him from the severe cold. The lack of adequate heating and insulation in many homes exacerbated the situation. Emergency responders were overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. Firefighters struggled to manage fires due to burst water pipes and frozen hydrants. One notable incident was a fire at a Hilton Garden Inn, where disabled sprinkler systems allowed the flames to spread rapidly. The hotel was full of locals seeking refuge from the cold, highlighting the widespread desperation and the challenges faced by emergency services. First responders, already stretched thin by the pandemic, faced additional pressures due to the storm. The Fort Worth car pileup saw healthcare workers involved in the crash, with some off-duty personnel jumping into action despite being injured themselves. The sheer number of incidents and the severe weather conditions made coordinated responses difficult, leading to delays and, in some cases, inadequate responses to emergencies. Picture the firefighters trying to battle blazes without enough water because of frozen hydrants, or paramedics navigating icy roads to reach those in need. The storm turned their already challenging jobs into nearly impossible tasks, yet many went above and beyond to help as many people as they could. The storm caused extensive damage to Texas's infrastructure. Many methane gas processing plants lost power because they were not considered essential services, making it difficult to supply gas to power stations. As temperatures dropped, water mains and pipes burst, leading to severe flooding and water shortages. The cascading failures of the energy and water infrastructure highlighted the interconnected nature of these systems and the compounding effects of such a widespread disaster. Residents were left without access to clean water. Many had to melt snow for drinking water, while others resorted to filling buckets from broken pipes. The power outages also disrupted water treatment plants, making the water supply unsafe. Social media was filled with images of people struggling to find water and stay warm, showcasing the widespread desperation and resourcefulness of the affected communities. The lack of preparation extended beyond the power grid. Many buildings and homes in Texas are not insulated for extreme cold, which led to significant damage from frozen and burst pipes. Insurance claims for property damage skyrocketed, adding financial stress to the already burdened residents. The economic impact of the storm was felt not only through direct damage but also through lost wages and the cost of emergency repairs. Imagine waking up to find your home flooded because a pipe burst overnight, or discovering that you have no water at all because the main lines are frozen. People were forced to come up with creative solutions just to get through the day, whether it was melting snow for water or using plastic bags to collect water from dripping pipes. In response to the crisis, Texas lawmakers passed Senate Bill 3, which required the weatherization of energy infrastructure to withstand extreme weather. ERCOT, the organization responsible for managing the state's electricity, improved its emergency response procedures and communication with the public. These changes aim to ensure that the power grid could handle future extreme weather events and that residents would be better informed and prepared. The Public Utility Commission of Texas also introduced stricter regulations to ensure energy companies comply with new standards. Public awareness campaigns were launched to educate residents on how to prepare for future emergencies, including home insulation and the dangers of carbon monoxide poisoning. These efforts aim to create a more resilient infrastructure and a more informed public, reducing the risk of a similar disaster occurring again. The legislative response included measures to increase the accountability of energy providers and improve the oversight of critical infrastructure. However, critics argue that more needs to be done to address the systemic issues that contributed to the crisis. There are calls for greater investment in renewable energy sources and better integration with the national grid to provide additional support during emergencies. Think about the long-term changes that need to be made: better insulation for homes, more robust energy systems that can handle extreme weather, and improved emergency response plans. It's not just about fixing what's broken, but also about building a system that can withstand future challenges. The February 2021 winter storm exposed significant vulnerabilities in Texas's energy infrastructure and emergency preparedness. While legislative and infrastructural changes have been made, there are still questions about whether these measures will be enough to handle future extreme weather events. The Great Texas Power Grid collapse serves as a crucial lesson in the importance of preparedness and resilience in the face of natural disasters. As we move forward, it is essential to continue improving our infrastructure and emergency response plans. Only by learning from past mistakes can we hope to better protect ourselves from the challenges that lie ahead. The storm highlighted the need for a more robust and flexible energy system, better emergency planning, and greater public awareness of the risks posed by extreme weather. Texas must build on the lessons learned to ensure that it is better prepared for future challenges, protecting both its residents and its economy from the devastating impacts of such crises. We must also recognize the human element in these disasters. The bravery of first responders, the resilience of everyday Texans, and the efforts of lawmakers and engineers to prevent future crises all play a crucial role in building a safer, more resilient state. The Great Texas Power Grid collapse was a wake-up call, and it's up to all of us to ensure that we are ready for whatever comes next. If you found this video informative, please like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Stay prepared and stay safe. On the afternoon of February 16, 2009, at around 3:40 p.m., a beloved pet chimpanzee named Travis suddenly went berserk. Travis, who had been a pampered pet for many years, attacked and severely injured his owner's friend. This brutal assault only ended when the police arrived and shot Travis dead. The reasons behind Travis's violent outburst remain a mystery. To understand how such a tragedy could unfold, we must go back to the beginning. Travis was born on October 21, 1995, at the Missouri Chimpanzee Sanctuary. His mother, Susie, was a retired zoo chimpanzee, and his father, Coco, was captured from the wilds of Africa. When Travis was just 3 days old, he was sold to Sandra and Jerry Herold for $50,000. Sandra, who had always dreamed of having a chimpanzee, was thrilled to bring Travis into her home in Stamford, Connecticut. From the moment he arrived, Travis was treated like a human child. Sandra bottle-fed him, dressed him in clothes, and even gave him his own crib in the Herold's bedroom. As Travis grew, he learned to brush his teeth, use the toilet, and eat at the dinner table. The Herolds adored Travis, and he quickly became the center of their world. Travis wasn't just a pet, he became a local celebrity. Sandra and Jerry took him everywhere: restaurants, public events, and even their tow business. Travis was friendly and charming, endearing himself to the community. He posed for pictures with the local police and was a familiar face around town. However, as Travis grew older, signs of trouble began to emerge. In 2003, during a drive to the tow shop, someone threw an empty bottle into Travis's half-open window. Upset, Travis unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the car door, and ran into the road. He climbed on cars and chased police officers, causing a commotion that lasted for hours. Although dismissed as playful behavior, this incident hinted at the potential dangers of keeping a wild animal as a pet. Despite his popularity, state authorities were increasingly concerned about Travis's potential for violence. They warned Sandra that as Travis matured, he would become stronger and more unpredictable. A mature chimpanzee could have the strength of at least 5 men and could pose a significant risk. However, Sandra believed that Travis was harmless and that he would never hurt anyone. She loved him dearly and saw him as her child. Tragedy struck the Herold family when Sandra's daughter died in a car accident and her husband Jerry was diagnosed with cancer. Sandra's emotional reliance on Travis grew stronger, and Travis, too, seemed affected by Jerry's illness. He became despondent, often sniffing at Sandra's clothes and lifting pictures of Jerry from the walls. The bond between Sandra and Travis deepened as they both struggled with their grief. On February 16, 2009, the tranquil life of Travis and Sandra took a horrific turn. Travis became unusually agitated, grabbing a set of car keys and running around the yard. Worried about his behavior, Sandra gave him Xanax, a tranquilizer used to treat anxiety, hoping it would calm him down. Sandra called her friend Charla Nash to come and help. Charla had been a longtime friend of the Herolds and had known Travis for years. When Charla arrived, she brought a red Elmo doll to distract Travis. However, upon seeing Charla with the doll, Travis's behavior changed instantly. He flew into a violent rage, charging at Charla with incredible force. Charla barely had time to react before Travis knocked her to the ground. The powerful chimpanzee began a brutal and relentless attack. He bit and tore at Charla's face and hands with a ferocity that shocked even seasoned emergency responders. Sandra, witnessing the horror unfold, desperately tried to intervene. She hit Travis with a shovel and even stabbed him with a knife, but nothing could stop the rampaging chimpanzee. Realizing she was powerless to stop Travis, Sandra made a frantic 911 call. Her voice was filled with terror and desperation as she begged the operator for immediate help. The 911 call, later released to the public, captured the sheer panic of the situation.
The chimp killed my friend!
What's the problem with your friend?
Oh, please!
What's the problem with your friend? I need to know.
Let the police up! With a gun! With a gun! Hurry
Who
up!
has a gun?
Please, hurry up! He's killing my girlfriend!
What is the problem?
He's killing my friend!
Who's killing your friend?
My chimpanzee!
Oh, your chimpanzee is killing your friend.
He ripped her apart! Hurry up!
With a gun.
Hurry up, please!
There's someone on the way.
With guns, please! Shoot him!
What is the monkey doing? Tell me what the monkey's...
He ripped her face off!
He ripped her face off?
He's trying to attack me! Please,
Okay,
hurry!
I need you to calm down a little bit. They're on the way. Can you put yourself away? I don't want the monkey attacking you.
Please, hurry up! Listen to me!
They're on the way, ma'am.
Guns! They gotta shoot him, please! Please, hurry!
Are you there with your friend? I need you to help your friend. Can you go help your friend?
I can't! He tried to attack me now!
Is he still there with your friend?
Yes!
Okay, so then back off. Then don't get any closer, okay? They're already on the way.
Please!
If the monkey moves away from your friend, let me know, okay? So we could try to help your friend.
No, I can't. She's dead.
The dispatcher tried to keep Sandra calm, but the urgency in her voice made it clear how dire the situation was. The call lasted 12 minutes, and during this time, Charla was left fighting for her life against Travis's relentless assault. When the police arrived, they found a scene of unimaginable horror. Charla was lying on the ground, unrecognizable and covered in blood. Travis, now calm, approached one of the police cars and smashed the side mirror. He then opened the car door, blood still dripping from his teeth. One of the officers managed to draw his firearm and shot Travis 4 times. The wounded chimpanzee let out a scream and ran back into the house, where he later died from his injuries. Charla Nash survived the attack but was left with severe injuries. Travis had torn off her hands and caused extensive damage to her face, including the loss of her eyes, nose, and mouth. Despite the severity of her injuries, Charla's will to live was strong. She underwent numerous surgeries, including a groundbreaking face transplant, and faced a long and challenging road to recovery. Sandra Herold was devastated by the attack and the loss of Travis. The media coverage and public scrutiny only added to her grief. She struggled with intense emotions and was haunted by the events of that fateful day. Sandra's health declined rapidly, and she passed away in 2010, just over a year after the attack. The tragic story of Travis the chimpanzee serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of keeping wild animals as pets. Despite the love and care given to Travis by the Herolds, his inherent wild instincts could not be suppressed. This horrific incident underscored the need for proper understanding and respect for wild animals and the risks involved in treating them as domesticated pets. Charla Nash's incredible resilience and determination in the face of unimaginable adversity remain an inspiration. Her story is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure and overcome even the most devastating circumstances. The Travis the chimpanzee attack will always be remembered as a cautionary tale about the fragile line between human affection and wild nature. In the beautiful city of Bellingham, surrounded by thick forests and a shimmering bay, 2 crucial parts of the community come together: Whatcom Creek, beloved for its salmon and as a playground for kids, and the Olympic Pipeline, crucial for transportation across the region. Both are central to everyday life until a tragic incident occurs where they intersect. On a lovely summer day at Whatcom Creek Park, 2 young boys are having fun in nature, playing beside the water. But suddenly, this peaceful place is shattered by a massive explosion, setting everything ablaze. What or who could have caused such a devastating blast? A long steel pipeline, operated by Olympic, runs from refineries in northern Washington to Portland, Oregon. This pipeline is key for moving fuel and is controlled from a distance in Renton. There, computers oversee the flow of fuel, looking out for any issues and managing pressure to prevent mishaps. However, hidden problems within the pipeline are about to unleash disaster. June 10th begins as a normal day for the staff at the control center. Then, around 4:43 in the afternoon, an operator notices a mistake in the computer logs that track the valves and flow of gasoline in the pipeline. This is the first hint that something is amiss. After checking again, they think all is well. As fuel is moved from the Cherry Point station to the Utsko facility, controllers start to redirect it to a terminal on Harbor Island in Seattle, a standard procedure that usually goes smoothly. Meanwhile, about 100 miles away in Bellingham, locals are enjoying the warm June afternoon in the tranquil park around Whatcom Creek Gorge, which cuts right through the city center. It's nearly the end of the school year, and 2 10-year-old boys, Stephen Sorais and Wade King, are playing by the river's edge, a spot where they feel secure. However, back at the control center in Renton, the atmosphere is tense. At 3:18 p.m., the operators begin the fuel transfer, but soon pressure starts to build up in the pipeline upstream from where the fuel is being sent. At first, they assume the increase in pressure is normal, just part of the routine ups and downs that happen during a fuel move. To handle this, the controllers turn on a backup pump to lower the pressure. Unexpectedly, the transfer of fuel fails, setting off alarms and causing the computers to stop responding. As the operating system crashes at this critical time, the situation worsens quickly, and by 3:22 p.m., the pumps shut down due to the rising pressure. The controllers, struggling with the frozen system, find it hard to grasp and control the quickly worsening situation. Just 6 minutes after the previous events, disaster strikes. The pipeline bursts under Whatcom Falls Park, spilling 237,000 gallons of gasoline, enough to fill 15,000 cars. A minute later, the pressure in the pipeline returns to normal, but the pipeline between Cherry Point and Renton shuts down. The controllers, not knowing about the burst, think the system is just malfunctioning. They stop the gasoline transfer from Cherry Point while teams check the problem. Thinking the issues are fixed, the controllers start moving gasoline from Cherry Point again. They don't know they're actually adding more gasoline to the spill. For the next 40 minutes, gasoline leaks into the creek, creating a very dangerous situation. Before heading out to fish at the creek, a recent high school graduate, Liam Wood, writes a note to his parents about where he's going. It will be the last note he ever writes. As time passes, the danger increases, hidden from those who could stop it. Nearly an hour after the burst, the leak detection software finally alerts the controllers to the severe problem. As they're about to start another pump, a company employee calls 911 from a bridge over the creek, reporting the smell of gasoline. Only then do the controllers in Renton realize there's a rupture.
911, there's a big smoke.
Immediately, there's a rush of action. Pipeline controllers start closing valves to separate the broken part. A minute later, police and fire crews begin to block roads around the creek and call a hazardous materials team to investigate. Gasoline keeps flowing from the burst near the water treatment plant, moving downstream and filling the water. The clear water of the creek turns milky white, polluted by the dangerous fuel. Fumes start to rise, forming a thick, choking cloud over the creek and nearby area.
Just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, it was literally just free-flowing gasoline, and the vapors went as high as you could see. It just blurred the whole landscape behind the creek. The vapors were so thick.
Liam continues fishing, unaware of the approaching danger. The gasoline fumes, heavier than air, begin to gather in the lower areas of the park, including the canyon where Liam is. The smells get stronger and soon overwhelm him. Trapped by the canyon walls, he can't escape the toxic fumes. Liam passes out, falls into the creek, and drowns. His body is only identified early the next morning.
Around 2:30 in the morning, we heard steps on the porch, and, well, at first I thought it was him, and it was the police. So they told us then.
The river has become a dangerous place as gasoline sits on the surface, creating an explosive mix that spreads downstream. Almost 90 minutes after the pipeline burst, the full extent of the danger is becoming clear. A 911 dispatcher calls Olympic's emergency number to ask about the leak source. They learn the company is aware and has already shut down the pipeline. Radio stations soon start sending out emergency messages, telling people to keep away from the creek. Evacuations begin for areas within 200 feet of the creek. The threat is immediate, but no one realizes just how close they are to a major disaster. Pipeline controllers finally call 911 to report a possible release of fuel into Whatcom Creek. This turns out to be a massive understatement. As gasoline flows downstream, any small spark could set off a huge fire. At the same time, two friends, Wade and Stephen, find an old cigarette lighter. Curiosity gets the better of them, and they start playing with it, not realizing the dangerous fumes and gasoline accumulating around them. They flick the lighter, and it instantly ignites the vapors with a loud explosion. Instinctively, they jump into the stream to try to escape, but they are severely burned. The explosion sends a huge fireball, reaching up to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, roaring down the creek towards Interstate 5 in the city center. The fire spreads quickly, extending about 1.5 miles along the creek. The entire city of Bellingham feels the impact. Flames consume the creek, and a towering black cloud of smoke rises 30,000 feet into the air, visible for miles around. The two boys are found by neighbors in shock and pain, their clothes scorched off by the intense heat. By 6:30 p.m., firefighters manage to control the major fires, and the sky begins to clear within the hour. Both boys are flown to a hospital in Seattle, but their outlook is grim. As the flames die down, the investigation into the disaster's cause begins. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, discovers that the explosion was not just a random incident but the result of a series of human mistakes, oversights, and systemic failures over many years. It started in 1994 during upgrades to the city's water treatment plant when contractors accidentally hit the nearby pipeline with heavy machinery. The damage seemed minor, and due to poor checks by Olympic, it went unnoticed. Fast forward to the late 90s, when the company performed some inline inspections that should have found the earlier damage, but they messed up the assessment and decided not to excavate and examine the damaged section. Just before the disaster, the company was launching a new facility, adding to the complications. A valve that controls the flow in the pipeline kept closing unexpectedly, causing operational and pressure issues, but despite recurring problems, they did nothing. Despite these clear problems, they ignored them until the pipeline burst. The total damage from the disaster was enormous. The fire destroyed 26 acres of the creek's ecosystem, burning the soil and evaporating the water. All aquatic life downstream from the burst site died, including over 100,000 fish, about 3,000 birds, and small mammals. Otters, beavers, and red-tailed hawks also perished. The explosion also wrecked Bellingham's water treatment plant and caused $58 million in damages to nearby properties. Tragically, the boys did not survive. Wade died in the early hours the day after the disaster, and Stephen passed away soon after.
My son loved baseball, and I didn't want him to suffer. So I told him there's a baseball game going on in heaven, and they needed a left-handed hitting catcher.
In a twist of fate, the boys became unintentional heroes. The explosion would have ignited those fumes eventually, and because it happened in a less populated area, the human damage was much less severe. The disaster could have been much worse if the gas cloud had reached all the way down to Bellingham Bay. Remarkably, the massive explosion and fire resulted in no other deaths, with only a few injuries reported. It was clear the incident could have been prevented many times over, and there were serious legal repercussions. In an unprecedented action, 2 Olympic employees were imprisoned for their roles. The company was fined over $100 million. Additionally, the families of the 2 boys received $75 million in a wrongful death lawsuit, while Liam's family settled for an undisclosed amount. The tragedy led to changes in safety regulations and the creation of the Pipeline Safety Trust. After the blast, Olympic halted its operations, and the pipeline was shut down for 20 months, the longest closure after an incident in U.S. history. Yet, with over 300,000 miles of liquid fuel pipelines crisscrossing America and a history of corporate neglect and human mistakes, the question remains not if another incident will occur, but when. If you found this video intriguing, please hit like and leave a comment to support the channel. Watch the next episode to learn more. On August 15, 1976, a SATA Airlines flight took off from Quito, Ecuador, bound for Cuenca. The plane, a Vickers Viscount 785D, was carrying 55 passengers and 4 crew members. It was supposed to be a routine, short flight, but it turned into a mystery that lasted for decades. Extensive searches were conducted, but no sign of the plane, passengers, or crew was ever found. For over 25 years, the location of the Viscount's wreckage was a mystery, leading to many theories about what happened to the plane and its passengers. Some of the wilder ideas included alien abductions and an area similar to the Bermuda Triangle in Ecuador. A more believable theory was that guerrilla fighters had hijacked the plane. This theory gained some traction because another SATA Viscount was taken over by 6 hijackers on October 20, 1971, and ended up at Mariscal Lamar International Airport. The Vickers Viscount 785D was a reliable aircraft, known for its spacious cabin and large windows. It was a popular choice for smaller airlines because of its dependability and low running costs. Despite its good track record, the disappearance of Flight 232 left no clues and baffled authorities. 3 years later, another SATA Airlines flight, Flight 011, also disappeared on the same route. This second disappearance was eerily similar to the first. But in 1984, 5 years after its disappearance, the wreckage of Flight 011 was discovered on a mountain slope at an elevation of 5,500 meters in the region of Shelmera, Pastaza province. The aircraft had mysteriously deviated 46 kilometers from its intended course. Although the wreckage was located, the cause of the deviation and crash was never determined. The discovery ended years of speculation, including a theory of hijacking for drug smuggling, but left many questions unanswered. The accident resulted in the deaths of all 57 people on board. This discovery provided some answers for the families of those on board Flight 011, but it did nothing to solve the mystery of Flight 232, which remained missing without a trace. In February 2003, 2 mountaineers, Pablo Chiquiza and Flavio Amos, were climbing Mount Chimborazo, the highest mountain in Ecuador. As they made their way up the steep and icy slopes, they stumbled upon a shocking sight. They found the wreckage of an old airplane. Among the debris, they saw luggage, newspapers from 1976, and well-preserved bodies still strapped into their seats, frozen in the cold. The plane they had discovered was SATA Airlines Flight 232, which had disappeared 26 years earlier. On August 15, 1976, Flight 232 had taken off from Quito, Ecuador, bound for Cuenca. The plane, a Vickers Viscount 785D, was carrying 55 passengers and 4 crew members. It was a routine flight expected to last less than 2 hours. The last communication from the plane was at 8:27 a.m. when the pilot reported their position over Ambato, Ecuador. After that, the plane vanished without a trace. When Chiquiza and Amos found the wreckage of Flight 232 on Mount Chimborazo, they also spoke to a local villager. The villager revealed that the military had found the plane years ago but never reported it. This strange revelation suggested that the wreckage had been discovered long before but kept secret for unknown reasons. Determined to bring closure to the families of the victims, Chiquiza and Amos wanted to inform the authorities. However, they faced resistance from a retired military officer named Gallo Arita. Arita insisted that the news had to be given to the Ecuadorian president first. Months passed with no official announcement. Finally, the mountaineers managed to speak directly to the Ecuadorian Minister of Defense. This led to a full military expedition to the crash site. The wreckage was officially confirmed as that of Flight 232. The families of the 59 occupants who had waited 26 years for answers finally learned the fate of their loved ones. The site of the wreckage on Mount Chimborazo was difficult to reach, which had helped preserve it. Given the inaccessibility and the challenging climb, it was decided to leave the site undisturbed. It was declared a sacred place, off-limits to climbers and tourists. The remains of the passengers and crew, along with the wreckage, remain on the mountain, serving as a somber reminder of the tragedy. After finding the plane's wreckage, there was much discussion about whether the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, often called black boxes, though they are orange, were on board. The aviation authority stated that the plane did not have these recorders. However, Patricio Mosquera, a former pilot of the same model plane who had flown it just before the crash, believed it had at least the flight data recorder, which he thought was required by regulation since 1976. But he wasn't sure if it had the cockpit voice recorder, as too much time had passed for him to remember clearly. Carlos Serrano, a former vice president of the airline, also believed that the plane and its sister aircraft, which was bought at the same time, were equipped with both recorders. In a significant decision, the families of the victims agreed to treat the crash site of Flight 232 as a sacred place. This meant that the search for bodies and wreckage was stopped, and no formal investigation into the crash was conducted by the aviation authority or local legal officials. As a result, the exact cause of the crash remains unknown. The mystery surrounding the military's initial silence and the untouched state of the site added another layer of intrigue to the story. The delayed revelation of the plane's location brought an end to a long period of uncertainty and speculation. For many families, it provided a form of closure, knowing the final resting place of their loved ones. The story of SATA Airlines Flight 232 is a poignant tale of loss, mystery, and eventual discovery, highlighting the enduring impact of such events on the families and communities involved. Although SATA Flight 232 was a disaster, at least it was found. As for the case of MH370, it is not even known where it is. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, heading to Beijing, China. There were 227 passengers and 12 crew members on board. The plane, a Boeing 777-200ER, took off at 12:41 a.m. Everything seemed normal at first. About 38 minutes after takeoff, the plane made its last contact with air traffic control.
Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
At 1:21 a.m., the transponder, which helps track the plane, was turned off. Suddenly, the plane disappeared from radar screens. This was the beginning of a mystery that has not been solved. A large search operation started right away. At first, they looked in the South China Sea, but then they learned the plane had changed direction. It flew west across the Malay Peninsula and into the Andaman Sea. Data from satellites showed the plane kept flying for many hours. This made the search area very large, covering parts of the Indian Ocean. Despite the hard work of many countries, no trace of the plane was found in the first searches. This left the families of the passengers and crew very worried and sad. Without any evidence, many ideas about what happened to the plane were discussed. Some people thought it was hijacked. Others thought there was a technical problem or that the pilot did something wrong, but without finding the plane, no one could be sure. In July 2015, over a year after the plane disappeared, a piece of the plane was found. This piece, called a flaperon, washed up on the shore of Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean. It was confirmed to be from MH370. This was a big discovery, but it did not lead to finding the rest of the plane. More pieces were found later, but the main wreckage and the important black boxes have never been found. The mystery of MH370 has led to changes in how planes are tracked to make flying safer. But many questions remain. The final location of the plane and what happened to everyone on board is still unknown. The story of MH370 is a sad reminder of how difficult it can be to find a lost plane and how hard it is for the families who are left without answers. The case of MH370, much like SITA Flight 232, shows the challenges in solving such mysteries. But while the wreckage of Flight 232 was eventually found, bringing some closure, the fate of MH370 remains a mystery, leaving families and the world waiting for answers. On the morning of June 29, 1995, Sampoong Department Store, a massive 5-story building in Seoul, South Korea, was on the brink of disaster. Cracks had widened to 10 centimeters, and loud cracking noises echoed throughout the building. But the owner of the department store decided not to close it. He worried about huge revenue loss. Only the executives and board members left the building. They left behind thousands of shoppers and staff. At 5:52 p.m. that day, the building suddenly collapsed, leading to the deaths of 502 people and injuring nearly 1,000 more. This tragedy stands as the largest peacetime disaster in South Korean history, but it wasn't just an accident, it was the result of a series of critical mistakes, negligence during the building's construction, and the greed of a group of people. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Seoul was undergoing a major transformation. South Korea had just become a democratic country in 1987, and the capital city hosted the Summer Olympics in 1988. These events led to a construction boom, with many ambitious projects being quickly approved and built. One such project was the Sampoong Department Store, originally planned as a 4-story residential building by the Sampoong Group in 1987. The project was initially managed by Woosung Construction. However, soon after construction began, Lee Jun, the chairman of the Sampoong Group's construction division, decided to change the building's purpose. Instead of a residential block, it was now going to be an upscale department store. This change came with significant alterations. An extra floor was added, and the number of support columns was reduced to make room for escalators. Woosung Construction expressed concerns about these changes, fearing they would affect the building's structural integrity. When they refused to proceed with the modifications, Lee Jun fired them and hired a more cooperative construction team. To bypass zoning regulations that limited the building's use, Lee Jun initially planned to include a roller skating rink on the newly added 5th floor. Later, he changed his mind and decided the 5th floor should be a food court with underfloor heating. These changes added even more stress to the already compromised support columns. As soon as construction was completed in 1990, problems began to surface. Tenants in nearby buildings complained about the noise from the air conditioning units installed on the roof of the department store. Instead of using cranes to move the heavy machinery, which would have been the proper procedure, workers dragged the units across the roof using rollers and pulleys. This caused cracks to form, which grew over time due to the vibrations from the air conditioning units. By April 1995, these cracks were visible on the ceiling of the 5th floor. Despite this, management only relocated some stores from the top floor to the basement and otherwise ignored the problem. By the morning of the 29th of June, the number and size of the cracks had increased dramatically, but the building was still kept open. Loud cracking noises were heard throughout the building as existing cracks yawned open to as wide as 10 centimeters or 3.9 inches. Worried, management switched off the air conditioning units, closed the worst affected sections of the top floor, and called an emergency board meeting. It was thought at this time that the eventual collapse of the building was inevitable. Chairman Lee Jun was present at the meeting. When the idea of evacuating the entire building was floated, he reacted angrily. It was an unusually busy day, and clearing out the entire department store would lead to a staggering loss of revenue. This argument proved persuasive, and it was decided that a full evacuation would be unnecessary. Instead, only the executives and board members left the building, Lee Jun included. They left behind thousands of shoppers and staff, including Lee Jun's own daughter-in-law, who worked for a store in the building. At 5:52 p.m., the roof gave way. The air conditioning units fell through to the 5th floor, causing it to collapse onto the floors below. The overburdened support columns failed, leading to a complete collapse of the south wing of the building in less than half a minute. This sudden collapse left hundreds of people trapped and injured in the wreckage. Rescue teams quickly arrived at the scene. They evacuated people from the parts of the building that were still standing and transported the injured to hospitals. Small fires, caused by vehicles crushed in the collapse, were extinguished. However, the mayor of Seoul halted the rescue operation shortly after it began, fearing that the remaining structure might collapse and endanger rescuers. Public protests forced the authorities to stabilize the wreckage with cables and resume the rescue efforts. Rescue workers used a special transmitter provided by Korea Telecom to activate the cell phones of people trapped in the rubble, helping them locate survivors. Many people were pulled from the debris, some injured but alive. Despite the official statement after 2 days that there were no more survivors, several people were found alive over the next 2 weeks. They had survived by drinking rainwater that trickled through the wreckage. However, many initial survivors drowned due to the excess water used by firefighters to extinguish small fires. The last survivor, 19-year-old Park Sung-hyun, was rescued after spending 17 days under the rubble, miraculously suffering only minor injuries. The final death toll of the disaster was 502, with 937 people injured. It was the deadliest accidental building collapse ever recorded at that time and remained so for over a decade. An investigation was launched to determine the cause of the collapse. Initial theories included a gas leak or a terrorist attack by North Korea, but these were soon ruled out. The investigation, led by Professor Lan Chung from the Dankook Engineering School, revealed that the collapse was due to structural failure. Tests showed that much of the concrete mix used was substandard, made of cement and seawater, and that some of the steel reinforcing rods were also below standard. Additionally, the support columns had been altered, and the air conditioning units had been dragged across the roof, making the collapse inevitable. Lee Jun was sentenced to 10.5 years in prison for criminal negligence. His son, who had been the CEO of the department store, received a 7-year sentence for accidental homicide and corruption. Several city officials were also imprisoned or fined for accepting bribes to overlook the building's poor condition. Both Lee Jun and his son agreed to surrender their assets to compensate the victims. The Sampoong Group ceased to exist, but the story didn't end there. The disaster prompted extensive inspections of buildings across Seoul, particularly those built during the late 1980s and early 1990s construction boom. Hundreds of buildings were found to be unsafe, with 1 in every 7 requiring significant rebuilding and only 1 in 50 deemed completely safe. The Sampoong department store had been built quickly and cheaply, generating significant wealth, but its unstable foundations led to a catastrophic failure. The site of the Sampoong department store remained vacant until 2000, when it was redeveloped into the Acravista apartment complexes. A memorial sculpture for the victims can be found at Yongnye Citizens Forest in Seoul. The Sampoong disaster remains a stark reminder of the dangers of cutting corners and ignoring safety regulations in pursuit of economic growth. It stands as a tragic chapter in South Korea's history, highlighting the importance of integrity and accountability in construction and development. The selfie, an integral part of our daily lives, has a history that stretches back far beyond the advent of social media. From the first photograph taken using a daguerreotype in 1839 to the perilous and often tragic incidents associated with selfie-taking today, the evolution of selfies is a story of technological innovation and cultural shifts. This documentary explores the fascinating journey of the selfie, uncovering its origins, rise to prominence, and the unforeseen dangers that accompany this seemingly innocent act. On August 19, 1839, the world witnessed the dawn of a new era in visual representation. Dominique François Arago, a distinguished French scientist, presented the daguerreotype to the Academy of Sciences. This groundbreaking invention allowed for the capture of lifelike images with a clarity and detail previously unimaginable. Later that same year, an American photographer used this technology to take a photograph of himself. This unassuming act marked the inception of what we now call the selfie. In the early years of photography, capturing images of people was a rare feat. The long exposure times required meant that early photographs were better suited to static objects. However, by the turn of the century, photographic technology had made significant strides. Around 1900, an anonymous woman took what might be the first self-portrait using a mirror. While we know little about her, the image she captured survives to this day, a testament to the enduring human desire to document one's own likeness. As cameras became more affordable and accessible, the practice of taking self-portraits grew increasingly common. By the early 2000s, the advent of cell phones with integrated cameras revolutionized the way we capture and share images. The first front-facing cameras, introduced in 2003, allowed users to see themselves as they took pictures, making selfies easier and more popular than ever. The term selfie first appeared in written form in 2002 on an internet forum, marking the beginning of a cultural phenomenon. By 2013, the word selfie had become so ingrained in popular culture that it was added to the Oxford English Dictionary. The rise of social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat further fueled the selfie craze. These platforms encouraged users to share personal moments, leading to a surge in the number of selfies taken and posted online. The quest for the perfect selfie became a driving force in many people's lives, pushing some to take increasingly dramatic and dangerous photos. And here are some death by selfie incidents, arranged by Time from the newest. On July 2023, an 18-year-old man named Vansh was tragically killed by a train in Mathura, India while taking a selfie on the Tiwarapuram railway bridge. This incident happened after he and his friends, having visited a local temple, decided to take photos on the railway bridge. Vansh was unable to avoid an oncoming train, which struck him due to its proximity and the force of the wind it generated. This prompted local authorities to issue warnings about the dangers of taking selfies near railway tracks and other hazardous locations. In July 2021, Sophia Chung and her friends embarked on a hike to Harpak Lai, Hong Kong, known for its scenic trails and views. On reaching the Pineapple Mountain site, known locally as the Hong Kong Grand Canyon, they approached a popular spot for taking photos, a waterfall overlooking a steep drop. On reaching the Chung decided to take a selfie right at the edge of the waterfall, an area known to be slippery due to the mist and algae. As she set up her shot, reportedly stepping back to capture the perfect angle with the sunset behind her, she lost her footing. Her friends, nearby at the time, witnessed her slip and fall into the deep pool below the waterfall. Despite immediate attempts to rescue her and rush her to the hospital, she succumbed to her injuries, highlighting the severe consequences of taking risks in dangerous locations. On November 8, 2017, 26-year-old influencer Wu Yoning, known for his daring stunts atop tall buildings, climbed to the highest point he could reach on the Huiyuan International Center in Changsha, China. From there, he scaled the outside of the building an additional 20 floors, reaching 62 stories above the ground. Wu intended to film himself performing stunts on precarious parts of the tower. Wu had been climbing buildings, cranes, and other tall structures for years, finding the activity both thrilling and lucrative. His dramatic photos, often showing him dangling from ledges or lying on the edge of huge drops, gained him tens of thousands of social media followers and several sponsorship deals. This particular climb was part of a photography competition with a prize of 100,000 yuan, about £11,000 or $13,000, money he needed for his wedding and his mother's medical bills. After setting up his camera, Wu attempted to perform pull-ups on the edge of the building. While he had successfully completed similar stunts before, this time he struggled to climb back over the ledge and lost his grip, falling to his death. His body was found by a window cleaner on a ledge about 45 stories below. A month later, his girlfriend confirmed his death on social media, leaving his followers in mourning. On October 9, 2015, a tragic incident occurred at El Teitio geothermal field in Chile, involving Belgian tourist Françoise Guillaume. Known for its breathtaking geysers, El Teitio attracted Guillaume for its natural beauty, but the visit took a perilous turn while she attempted to capture a selfie. Unaware of her proximity to danger, Guillaume inadvertently stepped backward into a pool of nearly boiling water next to a powerful geyser. Despite the swift response from her husband, who immediately pulled her from the scalding water, Guillaume sustained severe burns. Tragically, the extent of her injuries proved fatal. On August 9, 2015, David Gonzalez Lopez, a 32-year-old from Villasequila, tragically lost his life at a bull running festival in Villaseca de la Sagra. Attending with friends, Lopez ventured out from the protected spectator area, drawn closer to the action to film two bulls that had collided, one lying motionless from the impact. Distracted by his phone while recording, he was unaware of another bull charging directly toward him. This third bull struck him from behind, lifting him into the air and inflicting severe injuries. Despite immediate medical intervention and significant blood transfusions at the hospital, Lopez succumbed to his injuries. Witnesses described the attack as Lopez looking like a puppet being tossed around, highlighting the brutal and unforeseen nature of the incident. One of the earliest and most notable cases occurred on May 31, 2014, when 29-year-old amateur pilot Amritpal Singh died along with his passenger Jatinder Singh in a plane crash near Watkins, Colorado. During a series of short flights around Front Range Airport, Singh and his passengers took multiple selfies, as captured by a GoPro camera mounted on the airplane's windshield. Investigations by the National Transportation Safety Board revealed that the likely distraction from cell phone use for selfies and possibly texting contributed significantly to the crash. The aircraft, a Cessna 150K, was about 740 feet above ground when it entered a rapid descent, crashing into a wheat field. The National Transportation Safety Board findings pointed out that no mechanical issues were detected that could have caused the accident, emphasizing that the distraction led to spatial disorientation, an aerodynamic stall, and ultimately the fatal crash. While selfies let us share personal moments easily, they also come with serious risks. Today, more than one person a week worldwide dies in selfie-related accidents, whether by drowning, falling, or animal attacks. This sad reality reminds us of the dangers behind our cameras. As we keep enjoying selfies, it's important to stay aware of these risks and choose safety over the perfect shot. Thank you for watching our documentary on the history of the selfie. If you found this interesting, please like, subscribe for more short documentaries. Stay safe and think before you take that selfie. A deafening crash wakes up the people of Surfside, Florida. It sounds like an earthquake has hit the area, but the source is much closer, Champlain Towers south. At this beachfront condominium, a thick cloud of dust billows into the air. As the dust settles, a horrifying scene unfolds. The 12-story building has crumbled, becoming one of the most tragic construction collapses in U.S. history. Surfside, nestled near Miami, is known for its upscale beach vibe and luxurious resorts. The town offers an urban feel with its array of restaurants, coffee shops, and parks, yet the long sandy beaches suggest a serene getaway. Right on Collins Avenue, steps from the beach, stands Champlain Towers South, a condo building boasting breathtaking views of the ocean. Those who live here are often envied for their scenic homes. However, their idyllic residence is far from perfect. On June 24, 2021, a devastating truth comes to light. In an instant, 98 lives are lost, but the roots of this catastrophe stretch back decades, hidden just beneath the surface. Just moments before the tragedy, a couple was enjoying the mild evening in a hotel near Champlain Towers South. They observed something unusual by the garage entrance, a heap of concrete debris on the ground and streams of water dripping from above. The condo had a swimming pool, and it appeared that water from it was leaking into the garage, a grim sign of what was to come. At about 1:22 a.m., the concrete beam supporting the garage ceiling snapped, and the pool deck above collapsed. This loud crash awakened residents whose condos overlooked the pool area. They saw the entire deck fall onto the cars below, an alarming sight that sent them into immediate panic. Just seconds later, the catastrophe escalated. Following the initial collapse, the middle section of the building broke away and plummeted. From afar, the building's fall resembled a controlled demolition, with floors collapsing into each other in what experts describe as a pancake collapse. The northeast corner of the building briefly remained, then it too crumbled. The entire collapse took less than 12 seconds. A huge cloud of dust enveloped the area, followed by an eerie silence. When the dust cleared, a chilling scene was revealed. The western side of Champlain Tower South still stood, but where it joined the central section, the exposed interiors of wrecked condos were visible. It looked as though a giant had torn away part of the building. In a top-floor apartment, a children's bunk bed teetered on the edge of the precipice. Below it lay a massive pile of twisted metal and concrete, under which many people were buried. Just a minute after the building fell, the local fire department received the first emergency call. When the first responders arrived, they found a scene resembling a battlefield. The middle part of the building was completely destroyed. Survivors were fleeing from the parts of the building that were still standing. Calls for help echoed from beneath the debris.
Is anybody there? Is anybody down there injured? There's a lot of dust, I can barely see anything.
Miraculously, some residents were able to escape from the blocked sections of the building. Those trapped on higher floors shouted to get the attention of the rescue teams. It was immediately obvious that a huge disaster had hit Surfside, one that demanded the full response of Miami-Dade County. Hundreds of firefighters and police officers soon arrived, their sirens tearing through the night. By 4 a.m., a large-scale rescue operation was underway. Teams with search dogs and heavy lifting equipment were deployed to move large chunks of concrete. One of the first to be rescued were a teenager named Jonah Handler and his mom, Stacy Dawn Fang. They were pinned under a 9,500-pound slab of concrete that had created a small protective space. Huddled together and holding hands, they waited for help. Fortunately, someone walking their dog noticed Jonah's fingers poking through the rubble and alerted the rescuers. A group of firefighters quickly worked to lift the heavy slab with their jacks on the unstable debris. It was a delicate operation, any mistake could have caused the concrete to crush them. About an hour after the collapse, Jonah was safely extracted and rushed to the hospital. His mom, however, was harder to reach as she was deeper in the debris. After a strenuous effort, she too was rescued and taken for medical treatment, but tragically, she later died from her injuries. Firefighters managed to save 35 people, most of whom were in parts of the building that hadn't fallen. Still, 159 residents were unaccounted for. In response, the county mayor and the Florida governor declared a state of emergency, calling for every available resource to aid in the rescue efforts. A center for reuniting families was set up at the Surfside Community Center, where anxious people arrived in droves, searching for their missing loved ones. In the aftermath, various specialized rescue squads, including FEMA Urban Search and Rescue Task Force teams, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and even an international team from the Israeli Defense Forces Home Front Command, were deployed. These teams worked non-stop, in 12-hour shifts, around the clock. The rescue efforts were complicated by an underground fire that sent smoke through the ruins, obscuring vision and hindering progress. As the days passed, the list of missing people slowly shrank, but tragically, no new survivors were found. By July 1st, after a week of intense efforts, the count was 18 dead and 143 still missing. As the situation became increasingly perilous, the operation had to be paused. The remaining part of the building was tilting dangerously, posing a risk to the rescuers, who were warned it might collapse soon. Adding to the urgency, Tropical Storm Elsa was approaching Florida, threatening to bring strong winds and heavy rain that could destabilize the ruins further. With time running out, the rescue operations needed to move quickly, but hope was fading. On July 4th, a somber atmosphere replaced the usual Independence Day celebrations across Miami-Dade County. The focus remained on the rescue efforts at Champlain Tower South. To increase their chances of finding survivors, rescue teams employed thermal cameras and drones, but the situation looked bleak. The death toll had climbed to 24. That same day, it was announced that the unstable part of the building would be demolished between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. to prevent an uncontrolled collapse. The necessary explosives were prepared. As the storm loomed closer, urgency grew among the rescuers to proceed before conditions worsened. However, a group of residents opposed the demolition plan. These individuals, whose pets were still missing, had collected 18,000 signatures, pleading to delay the demolition until their pets could be rescued or located. On the evening of July 5th, at 10:30 p.m., the remaining unstable section of Champlain Towers South was brought down. 20 minutes later, recovery teams resumed their efforts. The following day, Tropical Storm Elsa hit Florida, bringing fierce winds and heavy rain. Despite the challenging conditions, the storm allowed rescuers to access parts of the debris that were previously unreachable. Sadly, they only found more victims, not survivors. By the end of that day, the death toll had climbed to 36, an increase of 10 in just 24 hours. 2 weeks after the disaster, the harsh reality set in that the chance of finding any survivors was nearly impossible. The mission was officially changed from a rescue to a recovery operation. This grim task continued until July 26, when the last victim was located. Ultimately, the tragedy claimed 98 lives, with only 3 residents surviving the collapse. This made the Champlain Tower South disaster one of the deadliest building collapses in U.S. history. As the nation mourned, there was also a desperate need for answers about how such a well-appointed building could simply fall apart. Champlain Tower South was no ordinary building. Condos there sold for between $600,000 to $700,000, with the penthouse fetching nearly $3 million just months before the collapse. The building boasted luxurious amenities like a 24-hour concierge, a surveillance system, valet parking, a barbecue area, gym, sauna, hot tub, and a heated outdoor pool. Despite its luxury, the building had serious hidden flaws. In October 2018, Morabito Consultants, an engineering firm, was brought in to inspect the structure. They found a major issue: the pool deck's waterproofing was failing. Their report warned that the waterproofing under the pool deck and the entrance drive was worn out and needed urgent replacement. The damaged waterproofing was causing significant structural damage to the concrete slab below these areas. The report stressed that if the waterproofing wasn't replaced soon, the damage to the concrete would grow rapidly, leading to severe consequences. The inspection revealed cracks in the concrete columns, beams, and walls that supported the parking garage underneath the pool deck. While the report stressed the urgent need to fix the waterproofing to ensure resident safety, it did not suggest that the building was in danger of collapsing. The engineering firm, Morabito Consultants, did not send this report to city officials. The estimated cost for the repairs was around $15 million, a large sum, but necessary given the scale of the repairs needed. The Condo Association approved the proposal and secured a loan to fund the work. The first priority was repairing the deteriorated roof. At the time of the collapse, contractors were actively working on these repairs. However, more urgent issues were discovered. Just 3 days before the tragedy, a pool contractor inspected the area to prepare a restoration bid. He was alarmed by what he found beneath the pool deck: water covering the floor, significant cracks in the concrete walls and ceiling, and exposed, rusty rebar. These signs raised serious concerns about the stability of the entire pool deck slab. Since the building's construction in 1981, the rebar supporting the pool deck had been slowly corroding, a process that unfolded over 40 years. On June 24, 2021, this deterioration reached a critical point, and the pool deck slab failed, compromising the foundation of the building's central section. Shortly thereafter, this part of the building collapsed into the area near the pool deck. 1.5 years after the disaster, the National Institute of Standards and Technology was still investigating the collapse. The inquiry was comprehensive, considering all possible factors that might have contributed to the building's failure, and was expected to take several years. The proximity of Champlain Tower South to the beach led investigators to also examine the effects of salt, humidity, and other environmental factors on the concrete's deterioration. There were also concerns about the building's construction quality. A forensic engineering expert hired by the town of Surfside, Alan E. Kilsheimer, noted that the rebars in the concrete beams were not arranged as originally planned in the blueprints. He also questioned whether the number of rebars used was sufficient for the building's structural integrity. Allegations also surfaced that the building investors had bribed local officials to secure construction permits for the condominium. By 2021, all individuals originally involved in designing, funding, and constructing the building had passed away. However, responsibility for the disaster was widespread, implicating the Condo Association, the companies tasked with the building's construction and maintenance, and the city of Surfside itself. Therefore, on June 23, 2022, the day before the disaster's first anniversary, Miami-Dade Circuit Judge Michael Hansman approved a tentative settlement of $1.02 billion between the accused parties and the families of the victims, along with the owners of the destroyed condos. The collapse of the Surfside condominium raised concerns among residents and authorities about the safety of other buildings in the area, potentially facing similar issues as Champlain Towers South. In response, Florida introduced a new law requiring all residential buildings 30 years or older and within 3 miles of the coast to undergo structural integrity inspections. For buildings beyond this coastal zone, inspections are mandated once they reach 25 years of age and every 10 years thereafter. This new legislation aims to prevent future tragedies by ensuring that all aging buildings are properly evaluated and maintained. Though these measures provide some reassurance to the residents of Surfside and the wider Florida community about the safety of their homes, they come as a somber reminder of the Champlain Tower South tragedy. The lives lost in the collapse are a tragic testament to the need for rigorous building oversight. In the early hours of May 2, 2018, emergency teams are searching through the remains of a high-rise tower. Within a mere 80 minutes, a well-known building on São Paulo's skyline had fallen. As they assess the extent of the catastrophe, there are several people missing, feared dead. Oddly, this building, constructed of steel and concrete, seems to have been brought down by a fire. Located in the bustling heart of São Paulo, the Wilton Paz de Almeida building stood as a pioneering edifice in Brazilian architecture when it was first constructed in the early 1960s. This skyscraper was one of the first in Brazil to feature a striking glass facade, a visionary design that cleverly masked its robust steel and concrete skeleton. The core of the building contained the elevator shafts and main staircase, encased in a durable framework of steel and concrete. Surrounding this core were just for strategically placed support columns, also crafted from steel and concrete but set back from the building's glassy perimeter. The floors, made of ribbed concrete, extended outward in a cantilever style around the core and columns, creating a spacious and adaptable interior. This design not only maximized the usable space but also, combined with the transparent facade, allowed for an abundance of natural light, albeit with the potential for significant heat gain. To counteract this, the building was equipped from the outset with an integrated air conditioning system, ingeniously incorporated into the floor design to conceal the ducting and maintain a comfortable climate inside. This system was essential for preventing condensation on the expansive glass panels. The elegant facade of the building was framed by slim aluminum supports that matched the slender profile of the concrete floor slabs. In its prime, the Wilton Paz de Almeida building was a marvel of modern design, capturing the gaze of all who passed by. Despite its architectural beauty, the building was not particularly noted for its structural strength, a trade-off that was considered during its design phase. The construction of the building spanned from 1961 to 1968, carried out by Morse and Barbach, and commissioned by its first owner. The owner leased the building's 26 stories to various tenants, including the Commercial Glass Company of Brazil and the Caixa Econômica Federal Bank, which occupied retail space on the ground level. The main entrance boasted a lavish touch with marble flooring imported from Greece. Upon its inauguration, the building's address was set at 22 Rua Antonio Diego, adjacent to the Evangelical Lutheran Church of São Paulo. Named in honor of Paraíso's older brother, the building initially had no architectural equals in the vicinity. However, due to unresolved financial issues, it was eventually seized by the government in 1992, becoming the headquarters for São Paulo Police and the Brazilian Social Security. The building, once a gleaming symbol of modern architectural innovation in São Paulo, was formally recognized for its historical, cultural, and environmental significance, securing its place on the city's heritage preservation list. Despite this accolade, the building underwent only minimal alterations during its tenure under government control, with no substantial modernization or refurbishment efforts undertaken. By 2003, this lack of attention took its toll, and the building was left abandoned, its initial promise of transformation into a cultural center unfulfilled. Neglect soon became apparent as the building aged visibly without maintenance, a familiar fate for unoccupied structures worldwide. It wasn't long before squatters began to inhabit the building. Reports on how these new occupants arrived were mixed. Some suggested government involvement, while others believed their settlement was entirely unauthorized. Regardless, it was clear that those residing within were not mere transient squatters, but rather families in dire circumstances, seeking refuge in the absence of alternatives. The building was then informally managed by the Movement for Social Struggle for Housing, where each family contributed a small fee for their makeshift homes. This phenomenon was not isolated, as the LA Times noted, with the government tolerating similar situations in up to 70 other buildings across downtown São Paulo. The building's decline accelerated, graffiti covered its walls, trash accumulated, and residents constructed partitions from scrap wood to carve out private spaces across its floors. Essential services such as elevators were long gone, their shafts repurposed into de facto garbage chutes, leading to refuse piling up at the base of the building, uncollected. Electricity was sporadic, with residents often resorting to dangerously tapping into nearby streetlights to power their homes. In 2015, the building was put on the market, and by 2018, efforts to reclaim the structure intensified. Local authorities held multiple discussions with the residents, warning of legal action if they did not vacate. These discussions spanned from February to April of that year, signaling a determined push to clear the building. However, fate would intervene, rendering these efforts moot, as the building's long-standing issues soon reached a critical point. In the early hours of May 1, 2018, disaster struck at the building in São Paulo when a fire ignited on the 5th floor. The exact cause of the blaze remains a matter of dispute. While many suspect a short circuit from makeshift electrical wiring, there are also reports of a violent altercation that escalated to a tragic extent, involving alcohol and a lit match. Regardless of its origin, the location and conditions of the fire were primed for rapid escalation. It quickly consumed the flammable makeshift partitions of wood and cardboard and, aided by the vacant elevator shafts, spread swiftly both upwards and across the building. At around 1:30 a.m., the smoke and flames began to rouse the sleeping residents, who frantically sought escape through the main staircase. As the building filled with smoke, the fire engulfed virtually every level, from the lobby to the roof. The intense heat caused the building's glass facade to burst, raining shards onto the streets below. Visible for miles due to its height, the blaze drew crowds of onlookers from across the city. Emergency services rushed to the scene, facing the daunting challenge of controlling the inferno and evacuating the tower. Amid their efforts, the fire reached a neighboring building. Then, at approximately 2:50 a.m., the structure succumbed to the intense heat and structural damage, collapsing dramatically into the street. The collapse also claimed the adjacent Evangelical Lutheran Church, burying it under debris. Tragically, many were still inside when the building fell. Reports from the New York Times highlighted the desperate cries for help from someone trapped on an upper floor just before the collapse, likely leading to their death. A massive response ensued, with around 160 firefighters dispatched to tackle the blaze and search the debris for survivors and victims. By the afternoon, the site was subdued to smoldering remnants. The calamity profoundly shook the community, symbolizing the grave housing crisis in the city. In the weeks that followed, rescue operations continued amidst the rubble. Several bodies were recovered, but the search was officially halted after 2 weeks, with at least 4 people still unaccounted for. The confirmed death toll stood at 7, though the exact number of casualties remained uncertain due to the informal nature of residents' registration in the building. The event not only highlighted the perilous living conditions but also underscored the urgent need for comprehensive urban housing reforms. The fire at the building not only claimed lives but also left many injured and displaced hundreds, forcing survivors into tents or to sleep on the streets. The tragedy stirred deep unrest within the local community, and this sentiment boiled over during a visit by President Michel Temer. He was in São Paulo for the May Day holiday and made a brief appearance at the site on the following Tuesday. However, his visit was cut short as angry residents confronted him, a reflection of the widespread frustration and grief. In the aftermath, the debris was eventually cleared and removed for disposal. The question lingering in the minds of many was why a building composed of steel and concrete, materials renowned for their fire resistance, could collapse so disastrously. The answer isn't straightforward and lies in the nuances of structural engineering and maintenance. Paulo Heleni, along with other experts, conducted a thorough investigation into the collapse. Their findings were published in a detailed paper that examined the condition and quality of the building materials. Interestingly, the investigations confirmed that the materials, including the rebar in the concrete, were of good quality and the spacing within the columns met the standards of the 1960s. However, the design of the building, with its central core supported by only 4 columns, was pinpointed as a critical factor. While this configuration efficiently handled normal gravitational loads, it proved inadequate against the lateral forces generated by intense heat. The fire, burning wood at temperatures upwards of 600 degrees Celsius, lasted for over an hour with a chimney effect exacerbated by the vacant lift shafts. This intense heat caused the building's steel components to expand significantly. According to Heleni's analysis, the thermal expansion resulted in torsional movements, rotational forces that twisted the structure. These forces were estimated to be about 20 times greater than those caused by wind or vertical loads, which the building was originally designed to withstand. This unexpected stress caused the building to twist and ultimately led to its catastrophic collapse, literally twisting itself apart under the combined effects of heat and structural vulnerabilities. On May 25, 1979, American Airlines Flight 191 started its takeoff on the runway, scheduled for a 5-hour journey. However, within less than a minute of flight, catastrophe struck. This incident would mark the deadliest single-aircraft aviation disaster in United States history. Founded in 1930, American Airlines is the flagship carrier of the United States and has grown to become the world's largest airline in terms of passenger transport. Starting in the early 1970s, American Airlines began optimizing their long-haul routes and turned to both Boeing and McDonnell Douglas to enhance their fleet. After evaluating the Boeing 747 and the McDonnell Douglas DC-10, American chose the DC-10 as their top aircraft. The DC-10s played a significant role in American's fleet, a tenure marked by both achievements and challenges. In 1972, a newly delivered DC-10, operating as Flight 96, suffered a cargo door failure but miraculously landed safely without any fatalities. This issue, however, led to a tragic accident on Turkish Airlines Flight 9812 2 years later. Unfortunately, this was not the last serious incident involving a DC-10. On May 25, 1979, American Airlines Flight 191 was poised to depart from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, headed for Los Angeles International Airport. The journey was expected to last 5 hours. Aboard were 271 individuals, 258 passengers, and 13 crew members. The cockpit was under the command of 53-year-old Captain Walter Lux, with 49-year-old First Officer James Dillard and 56-year-old Flight Engineer Alfred Udovich accompanying him. All three were seasoned pilots, familiar with this particular route. At 3:04 p.m., they received clearance for takeoff. First Officer Dillard increased the engines to takeoff thrust, and the plane began to accelerate down runway 32R. As the aircraft reached over 100 knots, it approached V1, the critical speed beyond which they could not safely abort takeoff. "Rotate," Captain Lux instructed, signaling Dillard to lift the plane into the air. Just as Dillard pulled back on the control column, a severe shudder and a metallic snap echoed through the cabin. "Damn," Captain Lux uttered as the cockpit instruments failed. In the control tower, an air traffic controller glanced up just in time to witness a horrifying scene. The left engine of Flight 191 had detached from the wing and struck the runway. He immediately shouted the information to his colleagues and called for emergency response. He tried to contact the doomed flight.
American 191 Heavy, you want to come back into what runway?
No answer came. On the ground and from the tower, observers watched the aircraft begin to tilt leftward, then roll completely onto its side, a chilling spectacle caught on camera by 2 photographers present at the scene. The plane continued to descend, still sideways, until it crashed into a hangar, erupting into a massive fireball. Eyewitnesses described the scene as a rain of fire falling down. Rescue crews hurried to the crash site, initially mistaking the flames for a fire at the nearby Standard Oil petroleum plant. It was soon clear, however, that the catastrophe involved a commercial jet. Firefighters subdued the blaze and started searching for survivors among the wreckage, but it quickly became evident that there were no survivors. All 271 people aboard perished. 2 mechanics in the hangar were also killed. The crash also ignited a nearby trailer park, causing extensive damage but thankfully no additional fatalities. The disaster of Flight 191 remains the deadliest single aircraft accident in U.S. aviation history. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, launched an investigation into the crash. It was immediately apparent that the engine's detachment had led to the catastrophic failure, but crucial questions lingered. How and why had the engine come loose? Could the pilots have managed to save the aircraft? And crucially, who was responsible for the accident? In response, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, mandated the grounding of all DC-10 aircraft and barred any foreign-operated DC-10s from entering U.S. airspace. Images of the ill-fated flight soon spread across national newspapers, significantly tarnishing the DC-10's safety reputation. In the aftermath, passengers worldwide were hesitant to fly on DC-10s. Initially, investigators believed a fractured bolt found on the runway was to blame. This theory was presented at a press conference, only for later findings to reveal that the bolt was not the underlying cause of the engine separation. To unearth the true cause of the disaster, investigators turned their attention to the aircraft's black boxes, which offered limited and problematic data. The cockpit voice recorder stopped recording immediately after Captain Lux's utterance of "damn" as it lost power when the left engine, its power source, detached. The flight data recorder yielded scrambled data, compromised by the plane's erratic and abnormal flight path. Further examination of the engine revealed dents unrelated to its impact with the runway. This clue led investigators to scrutinize maintenance records, revealing that the aircraft had been serviced 2 months before the crash at the American Airlines maintenance facility in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The service was part of a routine C-check, a comprehensive inspection of aircraft systems conducted every 12 to 18 months. A critical finding emerged from the investigation of the maintenance procedures. It was discovered that the maintenance personnel had deviated from standard procedures for engine repair. Rather than detaching the engine from its pylon for maintenance, workers removed the entire engine assembly with the pylon still attached, then reattached it using a forklift. This unconventional method risked misaligning the pylon with its locking pins, potentially bending them. Furthermore, the process made it too easy to forcefully reposition the pylon, causing damage and creating microscopic fractures that could compromise the structural integrity of the engine mount. The practice of using shortcuts during engine maintenance was not unique to American Airlines. Staff at Continental Airlines were also found to have been employing the same problematic method. With the DC-10 fleet still grounded, urgent repairs were carried out across both airlines' fleets. During these inspections, many aircraft were discovered to have stress fractures, some alarmingly close to causing complete structural failures. As the investigation progressed and the root cause of the engine detachment was identified, attention shifted to the actions of Flight 191's pilots. There was speculation about whether the pilots could have managed a safe return to the airport. Commercial aircraft are designed to operate with only one engine in emergencies, and Flight 191 had two functioning engines at the time of the crash. The definitive actions of the pilots, however, will likely remain unknown. The Quick Reference Handbook, QRH, which provides emergency procedures for pilots, offered some insights into the likely scenario. According to the QRH, in the event of an engine failure, pilots are advised to reduce speed to prepare for an emergency landing. However, in the case of Flight 191, the crew was unaware that they had physically lost an engine, not just its function. Therefore, maintaining speed would have been crucial to keep the aircraft stable aerodynamically. Photographs taken moments before the crash show a trail of white mist, which was later identified as hydraulic fluid. The loss of this fluid would have caused the flaps and slats on the left wing to revert to their neutral positions. Since the right side's flaps and slats were deployed to slow the aircraft down for an emergency approach, this created a severe imbalance in airflow. Without sufficient speed to counteract this asymmetry, the aircraft would have easily stalled and rolled onto its side. A pressing question remained: why were the crew unaware they were entering a stall? The answer lay with the loss of the cockpit voice recorder, which wasn't the only system powered by the left engine. Crucially, the captain's stick shaker, the stall warning system, was also connected to it. At that time, regulations did not require both pilot and co-pilot control columns to have stick shakers, nor was it mandatory for their power to come from all engines. Although the manufacturer McDonnell Douglas offered the option to equip both control columns with stick shakers, American Airlines had chosen not to implement this. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, determined that the primary cause of the disaster was the simplified, non-standard maintenance procedure used by American Airlines. The flight crew, unaware of the impending stall due to the failed warning system, had acted correctly based on the information available to them. As a consequence, American Airlines faced a $500,000 fine, equivalent to about $1.6 million today, and the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, following recommendations from the NTSB, imposed stricter maintenance protocols across the aviation industry. Additionally, it became mandatory for electrical systems to be powered by all engines, and both the pilot and co-pilot were required to have operational stick shakers. Automatic safety valves were also mandated on hydraulic lines to prevent pressure loss if they were severed. The FAA faced significant criticism for its oversight failures in monitoring airline maintenance practices. The crew chief responsible for the aircraft's final inspection before the disaster, Earl Russell Marshall, tragically took his own life following the incident. American Airlines continued operating the DC-10 until it was phased out in 2000, replaced by newer, more efficient aircraft. The site of the disaster was left undeveloped until 2011, when a permanent memorial was established to honor the 271 lives lost. O'Hare International Airport continues to operate as one of the world's busiest airports, yet it also serves as a somber reminder of the tragic event that took place there. The Morandi Bridge, officially named the Polcevera Viaduct, was inaugurated on September 4, 1967. It stood as a symbol of Italian engineering prowess and 1960s innovation, expected to last at least 50 years. Yet it barely reached its designated lifespan. On the morning of August 14, 2018, disaster struck at 11:36 a.m. when a 210-meter segment of the bridge catastrophically failed. Vehicles plunged 45 meters to the ground, resulting in the tragic loss of 43 lives. The initial shock and sorrow soon turned to fury as it emerged that this disaster was not entirely unforeseen. Warnings about the bridge's instability had been circulating for years. The 1960s were a vibrant time for Italy. The shadow of World War II was receding, Italian design was celebrated worldwide, and living standards were on the rise. The era also saw many Italians owning their first cars, which in turn spurred the demand for more roads and infrastructure. This need was particularly acute in Genoa, where the city was divided by the Polsevera Valley. A bid was launched for a new bridge to connect the two parts of the city and link the bustling A7 and A10 highways. The proposal that won was by Riccardo Morandi, an Italian engineer famed for his pioneering work with prestressed concrete. His design utilized considerably more concrete and less steel, a choice driven by the steel shortages in Italy during the early 1960s due to post-war restrictions. This made Morandi's design both appealing and cost-effective. Construction spanned from 1963 to 1967, and the bridge was officially opened on September 4, 1967, by President Giuseppe Saragat. The structure featured a lengthy stretch of elevated road supported by inverted concrete trestles and sections with longer spans to traverse the valley below, which was filled with industrial buildings, modest homes, railways, and a river. Particularly challenging were sections 9, 10, and 11 of the Polsevera Viaduct, both in terms of design and maintenance. To manage these long spans, Morandi used a distinctive blend of brutalist design, incorporating cantilevers from the concrete trestles below and cable stays from above, anchored to 90-meter towers. These cable stays were the most innovative part of the design, consisting of clusters of steel cables encased in prestressed concrete sleeves. The Italian press celebrated the new bridge enthusiastically. La Stampa newspaper praised its durability, claiming, "The bridge won't need any maintenance, neither will its stay cables, which are shielded from the elements by their concrete casing." An engineering website I visited offered this explanation of the stays. The concrete stays were made by encasing prestressing tendons within a thick concrete beam to protect against corrosion. The stays were then post-tensioned, keeping them compressed. As someone who isn't an engineer, this description doesn't clear up much for me. Even to a layperson, a few aspects of this design are notably concerning. First, the cables are all grouped into a single stay. If this single component fails, there's no secondary system to fall back on, no fail-safe. Second, the cables are encased within the concrete, making it impossible to visually inspect them for any corrosion. Concrete is undeniably strong and stable when used in the right conditions, but bridges like the Morandi Bridge face constant stress from traffic vibrations. They also expand and contract due to temperature changes and suffer from corrosion due to salty sea air and emissions from nearby factories. Over time, these factors can cause the concrete to crack, exposing the steel within to the elements and accelerating corrosion. This can drastically reduce a bridge's longevity. For instance, take a look at this photograph of another of Morandi's bridges. You can clearly see how such conditions could severely shorten a bridge's lifespan. The Genoa Bridge, soon after its inauguration, revealed the urgent need for extensive maintenance. Within just 5 years, parts of the steel deck abutments were severely corroded and had to be replaced with stainless steel. Even Riccardo Morandi, the bridge's designer, expressed concerns in a 1979 report about the escalating traffic loads and the corrosive effects of sea air mixed with acidic emissions from a nearby steel mill. These conditions were deteriorating the bridge much faster than anticipated. Morandi recommended regular maintenance to seal any cracks and exposed areas with epoxy resin, and proposed that the bridge be covered with a thick, rubberized paint to shield it from the elements. By the early 1990s, Italy was experiencing a financial downturn. In an effort to generate funds, the government decided to privatize some public assets, including the Morandi Bridge, which was sold off as part of a concession to manage the nation's toll roads. The winning bid came from a company partly owned by the billionaire Benetton family, who also held a controlling interest in Atlantia. Atlantia owned SPE Engineering, the firm responsible for bridge inspections across Italy. This created a potential conflict of interest. The Benettons not only owned the bridge but also had a majority stake in the company tasked with its inspection and maintenance. This arrangement raised significant concerns about the safety and oversight of the bridge, particularly for the citizens of Genoa who relied on it daily. Maintenance efforts were sporadically made as the corrosion damage to the upper parts of the stays became undeniable. Notably, on Tower 11, inspections revealed that about 30% of the cables had corroded away. In response, during the 1990s, both Towers 10 and 11 underwent remedial work which included the addition of extra cables and new steel sheathing, intended to alleviate stress on the original concrete stays. Strikingly, Tower 9, the one that would ultimately collapse in 2018, received no such repairs. The reasons for this omission remain unclear. Instead, monitoring systems were installed on the spans. These devices, essentially listening to the sounds of the rusting cables, were supposed to detect signs of strain loss within the concrete sleeves. As the 2010s progressed, the urgency to either replace or significantly repair the Morandi Bridge intensified. Despite these growing concerns, calls for action were consistently ignored or dismissed. In 2012, a local businessman ominously warned, "When that bridge falls down in a few years, we will all remember those who said no to repairing it." Alarming images that surfaced, showing what appeared to be rusty cables protruding from the deteriorating structure, still failed to spur governmental action. Ministers at the time optimistically claimed the bridge could last another 50 years, dismissing any concerns about its stability as mere fiction. Tragically, their assessments proved to be gravely mistaken. By April 2018, the company responsible for maintaining the Morandi Bridge had finally issued a tender for the necessary repairs, but it was tragically too late. On August 11 at 11:36 a.m., during a severe thunderstorm, Section 9 of the bridge catastrophically failed. Vehicles were sent plummeting 45 meters to the valley floor, where they were subsequently crushed by the collapsing concrete tower and support trestles. Video footage capturing the disaster showed the cable spans suddenly slackening and breaking apart, followed by the collapse of the roadway and the massive 90-meter support tower. The collapse resulted in the deaths of 43 people, with many more injured, yet the consequences could have been even more severe. Fortunately, it was a public holiday, meaning most of the warehouses below the bridge were empty. Additionally, the modular design of the bridge meant that only Section 9 failed, while spans 10 and 11, which hovered over residential blocks, remained intact. In the immediate aftermath, a 12-month state of emergency was declared in the Genoa district, and over 600 residents living under the bridge were evacuated due to fears of further collapse. Theories about the cause of the disaster ranged from a direct lightning strike during the storm to the cumulative effects of excessive traffic and high winds. The bridge's owners, the Benetton family, initially remained silent. It took them 48 hours to issue a statement, which simply expressed condolences to the victims' families. When questioned about their delayed response, family patriarch Gilberto Langley explained that their silence was intended as a mark of respect. The Italian public was incensed. Over the years, as road tolls climbed higher, there was a growing perception that the Benettons were profiting at the expense of infrastructure upkeep, a responsibility they were supposed to fulfill. To many, Benetton's reputation as a compassionate and caring brand seemed to be merely a facade, a notion that was significantly discredited following the collapse of the Morandi Bridge. While the full investigation into the bridge's collapse is ongoing, available information has pointed to neglect in maintenance as a critical factor. Currently, 59 individuals are facing trial, accused of not maintaining the bridge adequately. It has been revealed that inspections were sometimes conducted from a distance, with officials merely observing the structure through binoculars rather than performing close-up, thorough inspections on the bridge itself. Just days before the tragedy, a significant crack was reported on the bridge's surface, and simultaneously, road crews were adding heavy concrete jersey barriers, further stressing the already strained cable stays. Ultimately, this proved too much for the structure to withstand. The Morandi Bridge's failure was a result of a flawed design, years of insufficient maintenance, and a management approach that prioritized profits over safety, culminating in a disaster that many had feared and foreseen. Deciding what to do with the remnants of the Polsevra viaduct was a subject of debate, as some advocated for preserving the remains for historical significance. However, the decision was ultimately made to demolish the remaining parts of the bridge through a controlled explosion in June 2019. Interestingly, Riccardo Morandi, the bridge's original designer, passed away in 1989 and thus did not live to see the failure of his landmark design. The design used in the Morandi Bridge, featuring concrete-encased cable stays, was replicated in about half a dozen other bridges. Notably, at least 2 other Morandi bridges have experienced structural issues. Both the Wadi El Kuf Bridge in Libya and the Rafael Urdaneta Bridge in Venezuela have been reported as nearing collapse at various times in their existence. Therefore, if your travels ever take you over an aging concrete Morandi bridge, my advice would be straightforward: don't linger, accelerate, and make it to the other side as quickly as possible.